go like back in the old days before we had the really nice bulbs, which have these spectrums. We used to use metal halide bulbs in the vegetative cycle, and then you'd switch to a high pressure sodium, which was a much more orange light for the fruiting cycle. And then that made the plant, help make the plant turn into a fruiting thing. And then the sun in the winter then is a white light that's a very dead light that doesn't want to produce light or life. And this is just a cyclical thing, and this is the same thing during the day. Your morning sun, which everybody talks about, like the different legends where that morning sun, the dew from the morning sun, that's what you go to collect to do all your different alchemical procedures and whatnot. That's going to have the gold in it. And then your midday sun, your high suns, your hard blue sun. And then in the evening, it takes on that orange spectrum again. And then at night, you got the white moonlight. And so it's just the same thing, micro to macro, as above, so below.
All right, I feel you on that. Do you want to maybe go into a little bit more of like your own research and theory that you've been putting together on this alchemical cycle of the energies and, I guess, solar
Absolutely.
galactic alchemy?
Absolutely. So for me, where I started out was the world just as a galvanic cell of a battery. And so basically then in that the sun is acting as the anode and the moon is acting the cathode, and the moon is acting as the anode. And the moon alchemically then is
so
silver.
The sun is the anode, and the moon is the anode, and the Earth would be the cathode.
Right, the sun is the cathode. The sun is the cathode, and the moon is the anode. It's late. It's been a long day. So
yeah, I'm just asking to make sure, because I definitely want to hear where what you're saying here.
Absolutely. And so then, and that's a very simple system. Now there is a few things that happen with that. Is the understanding, okay, we got to go over a basic galvanic cell where one of the metals is a little bit more stable and one's a little bit less stable galvanically. All right. And so the silver side is subject to oxidation. And what's going to happen then is the silver side is going to degrade. And when it degrades, the particle is going to split. And so what happens is then part of that goes and jumps through the bridge. There you can see when you look at a basic galvanic cell, it jumps right over to the cathode, and that's the electron side. Well, then the positive side, the proton side, that floats off and gets grabbed up by oxygen. That's why oxygenation. And so then that carries that through the electrolytic fluid. And then you have usually a semi-permeable barrier. It's going to switch over. And now on the gold side, the cathode side, that proton and that electron are going to come back together. And rather than an oxygenation where you have a breaking apart, you have a hydrogen-driven reaction now. And so it's a fusion reaction instead of a fission reaction. That's a very basic thing that even happens in a battery. And the fusion reaction is much stronger, and that's where you derive the power that we can use from. Now, the thing about that is that anode will start depleting and the cathode grows as this process happens. And eventually the anode will wear out. Now, the way you undo that is you put a hard charge through into the cathode, And then this reverses this process. And now we have more of what BurnEye's working with here, which is an electrolysis side of things. And with that, now your golden cathode is going to start breaking down. And because we have that differential between the metals, it's actually going to flow and refill that anode back in. And we literally have a transmutation of the two metals happening. Now, as this whole system happens, where it starts breaking down is where the salts, the crystals start, and the plates start binding together. And you'll get this scaling of the plates and the crystals. Well, what's really happening when that happens is you're losing your polarization. You no longer have that differential. And so your whole system ends up losing power. And then you have to put a really hard charge, like not like a recharge charge, like a crazy hard charge into the system. And it breaks the whole thing back apart and repolarizes it. And this is all basic battery stuff, right? Now, where the problem for me came in was trying to put the other luminaries into the system. And yeah, it's real easy to put them just in a straight plate setup. And then that would mean that lead. And when you look at the alchemical metals, and then you put them into a galvanic breakdown, it aligns perfectly. Each one deteriorates slightly less than the last. But the system didn't really match the natural system. So how do I pull up my downloads? Can you go check on baby back there, please? So it didn't quite match the natural system. And what really
so from what I've seen, your luminaries are primarily your alkali metals. They're going to be your heavy activators.
100%. And so then, well, what really then set off the rest of this journey then is looking at the heart. And the heart, most of us know, most of us know that the heart cannot possibly work mechanically. That or pneumatically, if you tried to go through the miles and miles of veins and arteries, the head pressure that it would take would blow out all your veins and shoot out your body, no problem. So we know that works that way.
No, we can't approach any kind of muscular system with a backwards approach. We have to consider it in terms of its electrochemical output. And we know that the ATP and ADP conversion within cells is fully understood, and it's very well balanced within our current paradigm.
Exactly. So we instead look at when we look at the heart, then
are you sharing screen or wanting to share screen, Ben? We're not seeing it.
I'm trying to find the picture that's proper.
Oh, gotcha.
I just got this computer. Not here. Here we go. All I'm going to do right now is then I texted it to my wife. Let's see here. Messenger. Yes. Allow.
Oh, you got her.
And yeah. So where I started out was the heart. And when you look at the heart, what you have then is iron, which is Mars, which is represented by iron, and copper, or Venus, which is represented by copper. And what's going on then in the heart is a couple different actions, actually. The iron side is, if you hit it with electric, it magnetizes, it's ferromagnetic, and then that plays off of the copper side, which creates a cavitation right there. Because then the copper side produces a field. This is basic generation of power. Well, your iron side then is your red blood, and your iron is pulling in oxygen and it's pushing out hydrogen throughout your system. And now your copper side's pulling in hydrogen and pushing out oxygen. So what oxygen's doing in your system is it's oxygenating things. Just like he was just talking about with ATP, most people think you live off of glucose, but glucose has a carbon molecule bonded to it. So it's a stable molecule, and that needs to be broken apart. So your body breaks apart that carbon molecule. Well, now it needs to leave. And so it bonds with oxygen, and you end up exiting that out of your body. The oxygen is the war, the negative side of mercury. It's grabbing and taking. Well, now that it's ATP, it needs to be incorporated, or a basic mineral. If it's breaking it down to a mineral, also, your body's not just using fuel, minerals also. Now your body needs to be able to incorporate that into something. And you can't take a crystal and incorporate it into something because it's solid, so you need a solvent. So the hydrogen is allowing the fusion of things into the other side.
Right, exactly.
And so,
as the alchemist would say, your carbonic hydrides are allowing the oxidization reaction of your unbalanced electrochemical interaction.
Exactly. So that you have this polarity in the heart. So these two, Mars and Venus, aren't aligned with each other. They're a polarity of each other. Well, then we look at the brain, and this is also in so many different occult references, where the cerebrum is the sun and gold, and the cerebellum is silver and the moon, and we have the polarity there. You know, cerebellum meaning at war, cere at war with each other. And so, and then the third eye is the focal point, because each one of these is going to make an eye or energetic center. And
the bisexual Pisces, pain of being human and alive. Awareness sucks.
Yes. And so we have this system here. Here's your polarity right there going on. And this gets super interesting. So then also, because of that, I had to go, and I'm like, well, I went down this entire journey where I figured out that the sun, myself and Lucas King had figured out the sun had displaced Polaris as the head of the system. And that's an entire very long talk all on its own. That's just, so we're in a very polar system, and Polaris is the head of that. And then it comes down to the sun, moon, cerebrum, cerebellum. Polaris is the head of the system, and you think about your torus field around you, your auric field. Well, that's all dancing around to Polaris. And then here is your wandering stars that drop down and didn't follow the sun, or didn't follow God or Polaris. And so this is the sun and the moon, and that creates your third eye. Well, then that drops down to Mercury. Now, all the stories of Mercury, where he's the messenger of the gods, you look at the metals, these are all your godly metals: gold, platinum, silver. Everything below the Mercury line is a mundane metal: iron, copper, tin, lead, aluminum. That's all mundane levels. That's not your godly platinum level elements. So Mercury is the transition between the two, right? Well, then we already explained the heart part. Well, so this is one battery. Polaris, Mercury, and with the sun and the moon as the polarity there. Then Mercury, the Jupiter, and Mars and Venus is your heart there, your polarity there. Then you have the stories of Saturn and Uranus having their battles. where Uranus is the sky father, replaced by Saturn, blah, blah, blah. This is your sacral. And this is lead and aluminum. And you have your polarity here. And then I had to add in a root, which also had to talk to the Crow team, and they got a hold of Fortune Saint Germain, and they had to get a hold of a bunch of people because I'm working on things that nobody had ever thought of before, and lithium is the root, which it's amazing because then lithium controls your uptake of salts. And it really interacts with it. And then you look at it with the other metals, because that's right here at the root is where you would connect with your salt side, and you would have the same exact system on the crystal side to match this. Anyways, so each one of these is its own individual battery, with this one, Jupiter being the head, and then this one, you got your Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. Now these three put together, so just like I was talking about with, you went electrical or a magnetic over here, and then this turns electric. So I just got this computer, so I'm getting ready to do this art computer style and not me having hand drawn everything and taking pictures of it. I apologize. I'm working on it. But then this is going to get
no apology needed. And sorry, Ben, do you mind clicking on your main crystal tree one there to enlarge it if possible?
Yeah. Hold on one second, though. So this is going to be then an electric snake, and then this is going to be a magnetic snake. And each of these metals matches that up until you get up to here. And here's where you end up having the problem, because here's where the snake head is. And up here, these are all ferromagnetic.
Should we
now
be looking at a full screen here? I mean,
yeah, Ben, I think you're
sharing
the wrong.
I'm not seeing you pointing to
the wrong screen by accident. Like it's showing your whole messenger.
It's showing my whole messenger? Is it showing it now?
The picture?
Yeah.
It's showing 4 pictures together on a small screen and then your whole messenger. Sorry,
suck. No, don't apologize. This is on me, because I thought if I click on it, it would
I think it should either give you a tab that says switch to that one, or just hit share screen again and select a different window that the image opened up in. And sorry, brother.
Okay, media viewer, is that it? Yes. Nice. Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you.
So you look then, you can see this is then. Yeah. So then this is just 3 batteries tied together into a parallel, burp, and you've got your negative electrical snake going, and then your magnetic snake going, and so up here, all these are ferromagnetic, so they all make that weird push to the side, except for as this snake passes from gold to platinum. When gold and platinum mix together, they're the only 2 non-magnetic metals that mix together become magnetic. And that's where the snake head snaps around and bites the tail. And you get the whole Ouroboros and your whole field ties together. And so this is how your whole energetic field's flowing. And this all started from also just ties to the tree of life. And so this is a representation basically of each of those batteries, only this is the masculine side of it, just strictly the masculine. And this is what makes the tree of life. And so when you're looking at that, and I'm a heathen, I follow Odin, for anybody that doesn't know that. So Odin, Vili, and Ve made man. And so Odin is representing here your sulfur sulfur tree, and Ve is representing your your mercury tree, and Vili is representing your salt tree. Okay. Now, inside of each of these, then, as above, so below, this is where and we were talking about this before the show, where I was saying that you end up with 3 levels, like when you're talking about the salts. So each one of these is actually a diamond because these tie together, and that's how it makes the whole tree. So here's your salt tree. So this diamond would be here. I just didn't draw it in there, so you could tell that these 3 tie together like that. But this diamond would be here. And so here's your 4 cellular salts that are all this level, your 4 cellular salts that are this level, and your 4 cellular salts that are this level. Like when you're looking at the actual like human cellular salts, I don't know all the cell salts off the top of my head. So you start understanding, you get like Kali phos, Kali myrrh, Kali sulf, and then you got natrium sulf, natrium myrrh, natrium phos. And so you start understanding that then you could call one of these a natrium diamond, and dirt, and you have the 4 different basically alterations of the same damn thing. It's just slightly changed its configuration, and that makes it a different thing. And so you end up with 3 levels of 4, and then you've got, just like in your oil tree, most people understand that with cannabis, you got like THCA, the different THC levels. Well, again, the oils break down, dirt. And at this point, before you do the alchemical procedure, this tree, as the mercury tree, is your carbon tree. And so this tree then is going to be carbon, water, and ash, basically. So cellulose, cellulite. This is going to be the outside pieces of the cell. This is going to be your carbon, and then this is going to be your water. Now, these are the 3 things that you get out as an alchemist when you're burning out the dirty side of the ego, which currently is tying the whole system together, because this oil side wants to vaporize and rise, and this salt side wants to condense and sink. So this is tying two polarized forces together. But as an alchemist, I'm going to burn off, I'm going to get the water out. Then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to start burning off the carbon, which is going to unlock that. And then I'm going to lastly wash out the ash so I can drop out the pure salts. And now this is going to become just the actual mercury tree. And this is now the negative side of the mercury is going to be here. And this is actually going to end up being the oil tree. And this is the true sulfur that's residing inside of the oil, which is something most alchemists don't talk about. When you actually do the extractions, like say you do an extraction of a live plant. Like, I mean, I legitimately go out and I pick that fucking plant right there before the sun hits it in the morning. I walk down to the lab and I throw it in a dry ice frozen slurry of a negative 150 degrees. So it cryo freezes. The life of it never has time to move. Then I extract oil that essence. Yes. Then I pull that essence out while it's frozen at negative 150 degrees and I process it. When I do that, the oil that I extract from that is basically neon yellow, like this bright yellow, not a deep yellow at all. Well, if I do it after the plant's dried properly and taken care of, it'll basically be like an egg yolk orange. if the plant's not taken care of properly and you let it degrade for a while, it will start turning red and then it will turn black. Now, if you own a basic distillation setup, you will understand that through distillation, you can distill out the pure oil, the pure THC, the pure CBD. And that is completely clear, just like olive oil or any other oil. That coloring was the life that was residing inside of it, and that was dying. So that's the actual sulfur. Now, the oil's job is then to open up the salt. See, this is why I don't put alcohol back in my mix when I'm making the stone. I don't make the tinctures, I make the stone. And so the alcohol doesn't go back in the mix. The alcohol was a fucking negative solvent. You don't drink negative solvents. You don't put them back into your mixture. If it was metal alchemy, it would be acid that I was using to do the breakdown. Would you put acid in your final product before you put it in your body? Why would you do the same equivalent with the level of on the plant level? So I don't put the alcohol back in there. The oil is there to transition that sulfur back into the salt. So what the true feminine side of everything is this mercury, and the polarized sulfur and salt are the two sides of the masculine that are broken, that come back together and are healed through the feminine mercury. And so through that, the enslaved souls of the salt, which can't move, are now enlivened and freed with this transition of sulfur through the mercury into the salt, and that it all coagulates into the philosopher's stone when you're talking about the great work. And so this is just your each individual tree and how that pans out. This shows your different polarity centers or your different eyes. This one's going to be your all-seeing eye. This one's going to be your all-knowing eye. And this is going to be your ego eye. So that's your three batteries, your three polar centers, or your three minds. And it's real easy to tell when you're, as a human, that you have three minds. Because, like, if I ask you, all the time we've been in situations where we have this higher concept of what we would do in a situation, and then we don't. like you get there and that's not how you react. Like, that's because your ego made a decision that higher mind was cut out of. It was like, no, I will go and I will do this. And your ego's like, yeah, the fuck you will, buddy. And I went to prison for a number of years in South Dakota for cannabis. And when I was in prison, I seen guys that would go on water strike. And when they would break from the water strike, it was usually because they were looking down at the toilet, and they would stick their head right in the toilet and start slurping water. Now, I promise you, if you ask that dude, would you ever drink water out of the toilet? Hell no. Hell no. Why would I ever do that? And there is literally a faucet attached to the back of the toilet with a little sink. Like, why would I do that? It makes no sense. But after being deprived of water, when its body saw water, it overrode the rest of the system and said, water right there, right now. Dudes even gagging after they drank it. They still did it. Like, so I've been babbling long enough, I think.
I'm loving it, absorbing it all. And it ties in a lot to my own understanding of alchemy and the metal side of things, as well as the plasma side and teachings of Keshi's whole plasma science and GANs, which are monatomics, which are plasma state, which is just more advanced understandings of alchemy. And I believe he got a lot of his understandings from the Arabic, Persian, Iranian ancient alchemy understandings, and from that background. And that there's why alchemy has been so suppressed and why it's both so controversial as well as despised by modern Western academia and still practiced and embraced in the Oriental Eastern societies and philosophies is because it literally connects consciousness, life, soul, spirit, energies, and sciences and existence and practices into the physicality, chemical, biological, physical universe and reality, and where the occult delves into these essential magic, spiritual, interdimensional practices and whatnot. And in the West, because of this, the modern alchemical teachings and understanding are more solely just on the metaphysical aspects of it instead of the practicing science, chemistry, biology sides of it. And that everything you've been describing and doing is the first step of the what I've read in the Rosicrucian alchemy and their first publication, the lesser circulation of vegetable alchemy, as they call it, and vegetable being plants. The next one is the metals, and then the animals, and then the human, I believe is how it goes. I've only ever gotten my hands on the first, but that it is such an advanced science of chemistry and biology that just a couple hundred years ago, the community alchemist was the doctor, the scientist, the inventor, the chemist, everything, right? And as well as a lot of times like the spiritual shaman, wizard style leader as well. And that modern pharmaceuticals have also kind of stolen this science of biochemistry and put a compartmentalization and lid on it and taken away from the natural, where you have a lot of leftover indigenous tribal shamanistic populations still around the world practicing their traditions, but the shaman medicine man often use the plants around them and have better results or just efficient results as modern pharmaceutical. And then the Eastern Oriental as well as like Arabic alchemy practices, and that it's a combination of what Western science recognizes of chemistry and these different plant chemical compounds that we use and now call as drugs, where we super refine them, but oftentimes we either modify them or make them artificially, no longer actually practicing and harvesting the natural chemical products of them and making everything synthetically, at which point it's disconnecting from the life force, the chi, prana, mana, soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, or see it as a connection to God, whatever way anyone listening wants to interpret it, but that it is the natural way, and that in a lot of ways psychedelics are very similar too, and why they're a rite of passage and shamanistic inclusion in most indigenous and esoteric communities and societies and understandings as well, where and this gets back to the original alchemists making alcohol and essentially inventing alcohol and be calling spirits, that you're taking the spirit of this plant, refining it and using it and then consuming it. And it is that the different oils and flavors of, whether it was rye you're using into it or potato for your vodka, the different plants and the effects very similar, that psychedelics are one level up, where alcohol is just a dissociative that's disconnecting you from your consciousness and like your higher self, so you don't have to stress, or lets a lot of people with like OCD free themselves of like their constant overthinking and I guess chemical balance of the brain and their conscious connection. Where the psychedelic, you're taking the spirit oil chemical of the plant and using it as a bridge to connect your consciousness into the spiritual realm, but you're also getting the distortion of that spirit itself, that plant itself, and that experience of it, as opposed to being able to reach stillness, harmony, and one with yourself and the universe meditatively, and going connecting in that way. Similarly, as like yogis and grandmasters, and as well as remote viewers, even astral projecting, all these different ways. But then you have the clearest interpretation of you and the spiritual universe or realm that you're connecting into. And I've yet to do DMT, but once again, it's like, oh, you're muted, Ben.
Oh wow!
Right?
You're in for a ride. That's
well,
honestly,
I've never crossed over. See, I should rephrase that. I've done it a few times, but never enough, or like at the right way, like place that I actually crossed over or bridged over, sort of thing.
Yeah, you got to dab it a couple times. You got to take a couple hot dabs.
Now I've kind of been waiting to like go to like South America, try ayahuasca there, and DMT in some other special place when the time is right, sort of thing. But rambling on here, of the chemistry and biology, and that when you're taking these oils, these essences out of the plants, what the alchemists are calling the spirits or life force of it, that there's the actual science of it, that you are taking these chemical compounds that have different effects on your biological body, whether it's an antibiotic from the fungus or a psychedelic from different plants and fungus as well. Sorry, or like carcinogens. No, that's the wrong one. Anywho, the different drugs that they use. Yes.
Ethnogenics.
And that the alchemists understood this and used this a lot more, as do even the most basic shaman or what we call the most basic tribal indigenous groups and their medicine men, shamans, and wisdom keepers, that it is this science and spiritual, esoteric, occult practice and knowledge and connection and science of alchemy that the West has completely turned its back on and gone to the extreme opposite of physicality and physical only, with complete disconnect to the conscious, spiritual, universal, conscious realm, creator, and even like conscious creation of everything, starting with one's own self.
Absolutely. And what they're doing with the when they transition from plants, did we lose Exotic? What we're doing when we transition from plants to pharmaceuticals is they just basically you can't patent natural something that happens naturally. So they had to slightly change the way, imagine basically a little Lego house, and they had to just change some pieces around. And so the same basic pieces are still there, but it's not quite connected the same way anymore. Then they can patent that because that particular pattern is theirs. And the thing about that is the way that interacts with the receptors of your body, it doesn't recognize that as what it was before. Just like with my electrolysis machine right here, that's basically used to make Brown's gas, or HHO. HHO is the same thing as H2O, but no, it's not. Because can you go burn water? No,
different. But I would definitely say they are very, very different.
Chemical composition, he's saying, atomically.
Atomically, they are, well, it depends if you're counting protons and neutrons and electrons.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point.
Perhaps they are somewhat similar, but in terms of their electromotive binds, they are not the same thing at all.
They're not bound together at all the same.
Difference in electromotive force. And you can measure that on a voltmeter on the bench top.
Exactly. So that's what they're doing, is they're just restructuring things. And the thing is they're not taking into account that slight structural change. This is why you have so many side effects compared to the natural thing that they are trying to mimic, because your body's like, well, it's not quite right. And so it does these other odd, weird things. And it's all because of structuring, because they can patent a different structure. This is our structure. It's not a natural structure. The natural structure they can't patent at all.
And once again, going to the synthetic chemical compared to the natural, that's why you find that all of these synthetic drugs are exponentially more addictive and consciously consuming, and often turn people into zombies and slaves of this synthetic drug, losing their morals and doing anything to get to it, because they're essentially, it's not natural, and that they get addicted to the other realm or the bridge, but in this unnatural way, that they lose focus of their soul themselves and their moral conscious being and their connections in this realm, and all they can focus on is getting that bridge door back to the other realm.
Objectively, electrochemically, the human body responds to having the correct number of protons, neutrons, electrons with any given molecule or atom given to its system, right? So what pharmaceutical companies have done is found a way to patent unique ways in the development of chemical formulas which are not naturally found in plants or other spots in nature, and so that they can patent the process and fabrication of producing a synthetic formulation for a chemical that now can be uptook into the body and received by serotonin, norepinephrine, and various other receptors to perform a function. And unfortunately, if these things which are synthesized in order to be patentable are found in nature, they are not patentable, so we must find an alternative version in order to strap a label, a name, and a marketing campaign upon these materials.
And some big bucks.
Oh, big bucks indeed. Very big bucks.
And then you find things like the companies that are making the THC knockoff that's going to give you all kinds of problems and not work near as well as the plant that humans have been consuming since the beginning of time. Don't take the THC you can grow in your backyard. Pay a bunch of money for our chemical derivative that's slightly different that will give you side effects.
You just need a suffix placed after your molecule. It could be that molecular name -A, -B, -C, so that we can market it as a unique material. Please pay us money now, and plenty of it.
Yeah. And then they're the ones that end up being like the biggest donors to the anti-cannabis campaigns and things like that. Like as they're trying to push their chemical equivalent.
Oops, absolutely, right? Like it's evil. It's pretty much just evil. Right here I've pulled up Walter Russell's vortex-based periodic table, and very, very fascinating the geometry and how accurate it is in the salt versus metal aspects of the elements and the octaves of them. And you're talking earlier of the gold and the godlike, the platinums compared to the lower ones. It's very, very interesting in relation to my own electrolysis reactions of them, and how they break down off the anode sides and what forms from it. Point being that Walter Russell over 100 years ago came up with this, and that it fits the elements and the reactions from them a lot better than our current chart that we're taught, and that he was even able to predict a few elements that hadn't yet been officially discovered before they were, just through the geometry of this chart, and how much the octaves as well as the polar opposite, the red-blue cross spectrum, and salt versus metal, like how much alchemy is included in alchemical knowledge and the sacred geometry, these actual applicable uses and structures of it in science that we in the West have ignored, or that's taboo, where in fact the ancients understood it on a much larger, fuller scale, and that their pictographic languages, their symbol languages, and all of the lost symbology includes so much more coded information and useful knowledge and science within it that we're only now starting to rediscover. And another major part being the Platonic solids, as well as all of the alchemy symbols themselves, and that it seems that within it is lost larger knowledge of electromagnetics and universal energies in advanced alchemy of the ancients. See, and these symbols aren't good, the originals. And so, like, King Solomon's seals, were these the ones? No, sorry, wrong sigils. There's some sigils that look like highly advanced circuitry, and that all of these...
The Goetia? No, well,
could be. I don't know the actual name of which one was which.
It would be on the third shelf down, right in the middle, I think.
right in the middle.
Black book, right? To the
Yeah,
right
little
of that.
black book.
To the right of that?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
And so that from my research and like understanding and decipherment, I'm predicting and like suspect that a lot of these ancient alchemical symbols for each element and different matters and stuff are in fact symbolic. Oh, here we go. Aha, there we go. Yes, bang on. Sorry, what was the...
It's the Goetia. It's the lesser key of Solomon.
Gotcha. Right, like look at that. Those are circuits. Those, like that is technology.
Yeah, these.
Like 100%, exactly the ones I was talking about. Thank you. The Galician.
You betcha.
Like that is advanced energy coding, and tones and opens the port, right? Copies when using tones and opens the port. That I would not be surprised also if some of those sigils do in fact are like energy portal sort of encodings too. A lot of the different Wiccan, witch, and alchemists, I guess they're still the sigils or the spells or whatnot that they make. It's
it's got to be an energetic movement, 100%.
Right, and that it's quite probable portal technology that I suspect, and highly advanced math and geometry that they put into it, that in places where you're on energetic ley lines with these energy amplifiers onto the grids, while wearing these chakra resonator amplifier crowns, you could probably, yeah, here they are. Who knows, like could open portals between realms, in these different places, especially.
And for me, that Star of David there, if you go back to that, and then if you look at my Tree of Life, where I talk about where the snakehead wraps around and bites the tail, the very top of the tree is a triangle, and the very bottom of the tree is a triangle. When they snap around and bite each other, that's where the snakehead and the tail pass each other. And this is where you're talking about Solomon. He didn't just have control of legions of demons. He had legions of angels and demons. And so he had control of both the salt side and the sulfur side. And he's in the middle.
Right? Like, so including cymatics into this as well. And then I suspect during like eclipses and the equinoxes and solstices, specifically at a lot of these sites, that when they'd practice it, could open up portals between realms or who knows what.
Right.
Speculation allowed on that. I don't want to make any claims. So yeah, advanced alchemy right here, and understanding the transmutation circles. And then if you get into like their spell ones, power can, we're too blurry. Trying to find specific ones. Oh, that's dynamo. And like the positionings of people and energy within it. Trying to find the right one somewhere. So here's some cloud of monoatomic silver forming off of the silver anode reaction there. Some crazy copper nanotubes forming off the silver anode. Here's the separation of monoatomic and water exclusion zones. The red-blue self-organization within these monoatomics. Always spiraling inward, the implosion. This one is pretty fascinating. Jeremiah, if you see this, like this was where the anode reached a state that it was covered in bubbles that just sat there for weeks. I left it plugged in for like a couple of weeks and it just stayed. None of the bubbles went up. It was just coated in this layer of bubbles, almost looking like frog eggs or something like that, frog foam, underwater on the anode sides, not bubbling up, but like stuck to the copper coil.
Oh yeah, I see it. It's certainly a fascinating visual. I've been in and out. I'm doing lab work right now, so don't mind me.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, I've only replicated getting to this state a couple of times, and yeah, each of those are bubbles of gas that coated this anode coil going down. And here's what it looked like a day before that, where the copper oxide was forming, and then the coating of hydrogen bubbles or whatever gas that is starting to form and stick to it. And then the next day, complete big bubbles just glued to it. And here we go. This is you can see the 1 ounce pure silver coin there on the anode, and that it's eroding down, breaking down into this monoatomic cloud of silver here. In the reaction, I will go back to the full set of it, the cycle where it follows the moon pattern. But what I was originally looking for, the advanced spells, the geometry of it. Will we find it? That looks like advanced fractal arrays, antennas. And like the magic square mathematics are also a key part in making sigils and decoding sigil geometry, apparently. But like, look at these cathedral setups. They look like just macro machines. Oh, come on. Will we find it? Will it show up? I know it's in here somewhere. Like, look at circuit symbols. Like, that's circuitry. And
Yeah, go back up to that rectifier and that symbol of the rectifier and tell me that you couldn't just put a circle around that and tell me that that's not one of the King Solomon symbols, like that bridge rectifier. Like that looks exactly, or the attenuator,
right? Like, and that within the sigil circles, they have these exact same symbol shapes with like included into it. It's like, is it just connected on? Like,
that's what I'm saying. And our entire body, we all know this is fucking an electrical. It's all electrical signals, electrical and magnetic. That's all everything in this entire system, this entire world runs off of.
Exactly. And all life, this universe or realm, essentially everything. And that the West has, like the academic and technological West, at least publicly and socially, is a completely ignorant to the bioelectric science and side of all of it, and ignored it and suppressed it, I believe, intentionally on a corporate and military industrial side of things. But I suspect the Carillion frequency, that specific Hertzian frequency wavelength, probably has a lot to do with our own electromagnetic resonance and frequency. Do you know much about that, Jeremiah or Ben, of the Carillion frequency specifically?
I do not. I was curious what lab work Jeremiah is doing over there.
Jeremiah. Oh,
all right. I heard my name. I just dropped back by. Oh yeah. I think the question was lab work. What was I doing? Okay, I'm rebuilding a hot plate. I'm adding or re-adding my magnetic stirring apparatus. I took a look on Amazon and on eBay to see what was currently available for laboratory hot plates in a reasonable price range, and seems to be a quite large dichotomy of absolute garbage.
Yeah,
I would never want to use, and high quality equipment. And for some reason, I can build for basically $30 a piece of equipment that I'll have. And the one that I currently have, had it not had saltwater spilled out all over it, has lasted me over 10 years now and has never failed, well, except for having saltwater spilled all over it in the last couple of days. But otherwise, I've never had a single problem with it. I can't buy something of that kind of quality, and it's really unfortunate. So I'm going to go ahead and build myself a series of hot plates, because what I've seen online I just think is garbage. And I'd much rather have that control that I can easily build in with a cheap temperature controller.
Well, I don't like the temperature controller so much, as that's the problem. I find if I was going to build one, I would definitely do it off of a voltage system where I could regulate the temperature through voltage. So then I could run it through DC. Because what I don't like at all is I have a pretty nice.
How this thing kind of works, right? We basically got a heating element, runs off 120 volts, say CRMS. I'm using a solid state relay that's powered by a DC logic circuit that takes a live K-type thermocouple reading at the base in the center of the hot plate, which is away from the element, generally where I would place the thing that I want to be heated, say my flask or my beaker. Mm-hmm. And so it'll live measure exactly what the temperature is there and feed back to create a PIC or ramp setting, which slowly reduces the duty cycle of the pulse on versus off time for that heating element, allowing me to reach that temperature when I get close. It slowly tapers up to that right point instead of just hitting it and overshooting. It gives me really precise control. So for crystalline growth, you have to have it. Like forget about non-temperature control systems. You'll never be able to grow single massive perfect crystals with no imperfections unless you have a solid ramp setting for your temperature control. That's why I have to have it. And I can't simply buy that unless I intend to spend $400 plus. But
that's what I'm saying.
$40.
That's what I'm saying.
My
I 100% agree.
My new system is a recycled freaking like little soup heater, bowl heater, or something like that I've just modified, and it works perfectly well when you bypass the control.
Yeah, all you need to do is adjust the voltage. A little bit more voltage, it gets a little bit hotter, and you just figure it from there.
Yeah, you definitely do need the feedback, though. You really need to know what the temperature of that plate is. So temperature controllers are really important. If you haven't had good luck with them, it's probably because the controllers you're using suck. But it's not the controllers, it's not controllers in general. It's just the ones probably that you were using. So don't hate on them. I mean, they're great. They're necessary, really.
It's shocking how much of my lab equipment I've had to tear apart. And I mean, I'm talking about some of these pieces are almost $10,000, and I end up within a year tearing them apart and redoing them so they work right. Like, my God.
Yeah, the day that a product shows up off the shelf and is perfectly suitable as is, that'll be the day.
Yeah.
Right? Nostalgia is confirming your suspicions, Jeremiah, that modern hot plates are just garbage.
Well, in the temperature range, so your modern hot plate, what that's going to do is say you set it for 150 degrees. It's going to shoot up to 160, 165 even. Then it's going to drop clear down to 140, 135 even. And then all of a sudden it'll kick back on and it'll shoot back up. So when you're talking about crystallization, like Jeremiah was talking about, you need it to be really even, because what you're talking about with crystallization is you've got this material, this, like a crystal material that's in a solvent. And as it's coming back together, it needs to do it evenly and perfectly in order for it to make them hard plutonic edges. And if you have a fluctuating heat like that, your solvent is going to occasionally go out faster, go out slower, go out faster. Right. It's going to crystallize.
So by example, in this case, right, I'm crystallizing two different materials. I've started with alum, and if anybody wants to make crystals at home and they want to try or play around with crystallization, the easiest material that I would recommend anybody use is alum. It crystallizes faster than almost any salt that I've ever seen. I mean, we're talking rapid. If I set a super saturated solution, and here's the thing, as you add salt to water, you increase its boiling temperature. So you can get a super saturated salt solution of alum in dihydrogen monoxide, or just basically H2O, as your solvent. As you lose more of that solvent, that H2O, your salts are going to be left behind. So you hit this point of saturation where at any given temperature, you can dissolve X number of grams of your alum salt. So I've been able to show that I can grow an alum crystal over 1 inch in diameter in less than 1 hour in a monocrystalline format. It's insane, and you can do this by controlled ramp temperature and dissolution of your supersaturated solute. But the harder thing to do is things like Rochelle salts. Rochelle salts tend to grow very slowly. They're not at all an automatic catalyzation reaction. And you'll tend to get like a multicrystalline substance instead of having large single crystals if you oversaturate. But you'll also have to wait, because unless you seed that thing, it's just simply not going to grow. However, if you do seed it at exactly the right temperature at exactly the right time, you can then grow a single crystal and get a rather large monolithic form out of it.
Yeah.
I found though that the difference between 5 degrees, 5 degrees is it.
All you gets microcrystals. When you have that huge fluctuation that we were talking about not wanting, all you gets microcrystals. It's just a whole, a soup of microcrystals.
Right. It drops out of suspension and you get a huge amount of seeds that you don't want. And after that, we call that crashing out. you'll actually see the entire solute go a murky or a milky kind of color. And this is exactly what we want to avoid at all costs, because when you crash it out, you're going to have to reheat it, and that means thermal shock to the crystal that you're growing. Thermal shock will destroy the crystal, as we found out.
That's the worst part about living off grid.
Right. And that is what our ultimate goal is going to be, is how to get more of your own free energy combined with these batteries, but also solar. And I also want to do some hydro electric with reverse engineering some fans, and especially washing machines that you can do and get 240 out of very easily, just in small creeks. And then after getting all of that basics down and getting, a decent amount of sufficient usable energy on the old homesteads, to then focus on hydrogen and Brown's gas, HHO, and converting and using it in vehicles and at least hybrids.
See, that's where I'm at with it right now. Is so I've lived off of solar.
You're on generation 3,
and I've lived off of solar for a number of years, and I've got an 8 kilowatt 240 volt Outback inverter, and I've got 42 300 watt panels. Now the problem is realistically, like if you try to run anything that's pulling anything, just your fridge alone, I have 24 L16 batteries that are supposed to be 1600 amp hours, and it's 3 series into parallels. So 3 series of 8, paralleled into 3. Trying to live off of that fridge just depletes it hard. So with the power generation, though, it's fairly easy to turn any kind of a plant oil into biodiesel. And like where I live, there's green plants all year, all year long, berries, you name it. So if you get a biodiesel manufactory and then you hydrogenate it with your Brown's gas, which is supposed to either double or triple, you see them advertise triple the amount of use out of the fuel. But I've heard a lot closer to double. I have a system put together to go put on my generator to see how that pans out, a diesel generator. But then that whole huge storm's been smashing us since, and I've been scrambling just to do anything, much less that. So if you get that, you're running basically off nothing at that point. A little bit of biodiesel and some water, some hydrogen and water, made from water that's being produced from the generator itself.
Right? Like it's the most hidden technology intentionally. They keep trying to state, oh, hydrogen is the fuel and energy of the future. It's coming, but we have to make the hydrogen, and it takes a whole lot of energy and it's expensive, and we have to sell you this hydrogen back, and it's still decades away. Meanwhile, it's like literally there's a few out there, I believe, that still have working models. One specifically being, oh my goodness, Stanley Meyer's twin brother. He had a twin brother who's still alive that still has all of his patents and all of the leftover model working units that Stanley had made. he just has gone into complete isolation and avoiding the public, as he doesn't want the same fate as his brother tragically suffered. But that literally we could all be using a little bit of water in your tank instead of gasoline and powering our vehicles everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Well, at the end of the day, your vehicle is a hydrogen vehicle anyways. All the gases that we put in and use are hydrocarbon gases. So what's happening? We're getting energy from the hydrogen, the carbon's breaking off, and that's what your exhaust is. And so so anytime you look at a hydrocarbon gas, all that's literally in that chain is hydrogen and carbon. Only two things. Now, the hydrogen is the thing that will explode and burn. Carbon does not. So carbon's exhaust, hydrogen's the boom boom. Now, if we can we don't really need the carbon. We just want the boom boom. And so this is what we're talking about now with water. Instead of being carbon as the exhaust, oxygen is the exhaust, and we still get the hydrogen, which is the boom boom. That's what we want.
Right. Good point, right? Only it's the dirty way of doing it.
Right. Their byproduct is carbon, and with the hydrogen gas, the byproduct is oxygen.
Right. Yeah. It's just so backwards.
It's super backwards. Super backwards. But again, once you get down to the basic understanding, when you start looking at any hydrocarbon gas chain and notice that the only things in there are hydrogen and carbon, and out of that, only one of those things is explosive, you know what's going on. Everything's truly running off of hydrogen, and they're just using these different gases that have carbon as a binder, and it's the breaking of that binding from the carbon, and then the carbon's, again, still then the byproduct.
Right? Like,
super simple.
So do you have, were you saying like you've got any hydrogen going into one of your vehicles yet, or not? That's your next step.
I have, that is an upcoming project here. I want to see how it pans out on this generator before I put it on my because I've got a 7.3 liter diesel that's got 400,000 miles on it, and that's my baby. It's got it still runs like a mad beast. And I just now got a backup truck, but I want to get another 7.3 liter. And then definitely one of those is going to have it on there. My real concern, though, and part of why I haven't done it yet, is where I live. Like, I live in an area where the roads are literally third world country roads. Like, fucking
currently 2/3 of them washed out. So
yes,
so not even
so
issue.
the idea of making explosive gas under my hood with all my other stuff, while my truck's going, and I'm in the truck, and I'm literally going like that. I mean, we call it the spinal adjuster, the road between here and town. It's either going to throw it out or put it back or something, but it's definitely going to move it.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. So the unit first, and that's what you're working on here.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So I do have a diesel generator, and in that there's a real easy line going right into the vacuum system. Like I said, had we not got 5 feet of snow and then everything else just getting crazy, I would have already implemented that and seen what type of increase we're getting in the consumption or decrease in the fuel consumption. I'm told it will triple. Realistically, I'm hoping for double. If I can double my the
right,
time,
yeah, double, heck
same
yeah,
fuel. Yeah,
half,
that's good
price.
numbers.
Half petrol, diesel, and just water replacement. Like, if you get half the population doing that, that's 1/4 the amount of oil, gas we're burning, and amount of CO2 going out. Like, energy crisis avoided.
Exactly. Well, and then it's stable molecules that are getting released. Part of the problem with the emissions out of fuel is it's producing so much carbon that you're getting carbon monoxide instead of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide's all right, is good because it's a stable molecule, where carbon monoxide, it's not stable, and so it really wants another oxygen. And so when you breathe that in, it's really kind of doing the counter of what you want to breathe in, where you want that thing to be able to grab carbon molecules that your body's releasing and transport them out in a way so your system can keep functioning. Because literally at the end of the day, your system's no different than a fire. Like when you just a basic log fire, when you see all that black carbon get built up and your fire starts dampening down and dies, and then as soon as you blow some oxygen in there, the oxygen in and of itself isn't explosive, but what it does is carry away that carbon, and then all of a sudden you see the flame jump back to life because it's allowing that reaction to happen. The oxygen's pulling the carbon away, and now the reaction can continue to happen. And that's what's going on with everything inside your body, the whole nine.
Right? Like, it's just ridiculous. But
yeah, when you put a carbon monoxide in there, it's grabbing an oxygen. It's not grabbing a carbon. Now it's taking away oxygens, which we're going to take away carbons. That's why that carbon monoxide is so fucking dangerous. And so deadly. So that's what's getting released off of these emissions, where when you're talking about adding the hydrogen into the system, that's adding an oxide. That's adding an oxygen, which is the thing we want released.
Right? Yeah, literally poisoning instead of healing or being useful.
Yeah. And like I said, all this is real basic. You can look at chemical breakdowns. And some of the other secrets that they hide that are real easy is even transmutation. Can you pull up, while you're doing this, pull up decay chain of uranium? Just pull that up real easy.
Okay.
But uranium decay chain.
Which one should I click on?
And the easiest one to see what the little bubbles mean. Whichever ones are, yeah, that one's fine. Now, so we start understanding when we look at this is when a radioactive material is what's making it radioactive is that it's bleeding off the ion side of things, not the electron side. It's bleeding off the ion side. So, and it's doing that until it reaches itself to be a stable molecule. So, uranium has a whole lot of extra, protons, and it's going to keep bleeding that shit off because it doesn't have enough neutrons to stabilize itself, because the neutrons is what stabilizes the system, and then the electrons and the protons in a stable molecule are typically going to be the same number. And so until it reaches a stabilization where the protons and electrons match the neutrons, it's going to keep bleeding off these fucking protons. And it's as it does that, you see that it goes from uranium, it becomes all kinds of different things: radium, radon, polonium, bismuths, where it actually starts becoming a little bit stable when it gets down to bismuth, and it keeps doing that. And then it flips actually at bismuth, I believe it is. And then it starts bleeding off too far, because that's why lead soaks in radiation, because lead's the flip side of uranium, where it breaks itself down clear down to uranium by throwing off protons, and then it'll break down clear down to lead. But if you add protons back, like lead soaks in enough radiation, eventually it starts running itself back up the chain. Now, one of the tricks for trying to reach stabilization then with that, and you'll see this if you ever do any study on nuclear enrichment, one of the ways that they enrich things is with thorium, because thorium actually transfers neutrons instead of protons and electrons. It actually, or protons, what's getting bled off, and then the electrons naturally disconnect. But the thorium makes and adds neutrons. So you can take radium and upgrade radium through thorium all the way up to uranium. And this is all just transmutation, just understanding how many protons, because the only thing that makes something the atomic number of something is how many protons it has in its matrix.
Yes, it does. Very, very true. And that is why I don't mess around with the larger metals, anything heavier than bismuth. Actually, funny that you say that, that it flips there on my electrolysis and the anode side, because it is the more higher energy you put in, as well as the higher density metals you use, the more into the cold fusion and atomic actual side of things you can go, and you can start creating different isotopes and decay inadvertently off of these bigger, heavier, more unstable element metals. And that I intuitively suspected that, and then I brought it up with Bob Greenier of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, and he said it was 100% the case, and most likely one of the reasons of Martin Fleischmann himself's early death due to cancer and radiation exposure.
Which, interesting enough, through if you consume HHO, suppose, from what I'm told, and I've not done any experiments on this myself, because of the addition of that hydrogen in your system, and that part of the reason that people have a trouble transitioning these different energies that we're receiving is because we're dehydrated as shit. As a species, everybody walks around all day drinking Coke and coffee, and and all these different things that actually dehydrate you, and they don't hydrate themselves. Well, just like after you go drinking, where you literally dehydrate your body and you dump out way more liquid, you piss 10 times more than you just drank. And that's because you literally are dehydrating yourself, pulling your oils and your hydrogen right out. And then in the morning, you go and you out in the sun, and you're like, it's so bright, it hurts. Because you're dehydrated, because you can't transition that energy into your body anymore. And so supposedly if you use HHO right before or during hydrogen problem, when you're exposed to a lot of radiation, you don't suffer the radiation problems when you're heavily hydrogenated, supposedly.
Really? That's fascinating, and actually would make sense. Like, makes sense in my mind. Like, I really need to get on the Brown's gas usage and experimenting and making myself. Why I've held off so far is that with the different electrodes and metals and different experiments I've done with electrolysis, there's all sorts of gases coming off other than Brown's gas itself that I don't know what's what, and that's going to be a bit more of my focus going forward on figuring that out, and actually going to try to attain one of the already out there produced verified Brown's gas devices.
Well, if you go with George Weissman's, use Alchemy as the code, and you get like $500 off. It'll be an easy code to remember. Well, with the water electrolyzers also, you're not attempting to break down.
Yeah, the electrolyzers, it's just putting out HHO gas, isn't it? The mist. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Just covering that point here, as you guys are now talking about HHO. So I'll mention hydroxy gas. HHO is hydroxy gas, as it's commonly called. It is slightly different than Brown's gas. It's slightly different than your simple gas electromotive dissolution of 2H and O. And so you end up with a new type of molecular assembly, which is not quite consistent. You can get charge clusters, which can be the assembly of electrons unbound to protons in large numbers. And those can perform very unusual functions, as Bob Greenyer covers quite extensively on his channel, Martin Flesch Memorial Project. So charge clusters and HHO are directly correlated because the electric field potential at the electrodes of general electrolyzing systems under ideal conditions and very high surface area can produce these types of clustering events, and you'll end up with higher electron potentials, giving the liquid a negative charge instead of a neutral charge, which it otherwise should have. And they can perform transmutation because of their ability to neutralize and immediately disassemble other stable electron valence bands in constituent elements.
It's fucking amazing. So when you do that, is what he's talking about, in a more layman's terms, like you take a typical steel. Steel melts at what, like a 1200 degrees or something like that, is where it's going to turn liquid and turn into a puddle. If you do this with this gas, which is ignitable, because of this, the electrons are actually what's creating those extra electrons, or is what's making that metal, exciting it and making it go into a liquid state.
Right, exactly. So our proof of this would be like, say, for example, Ohmsol gas, or OHMASA, if you wanted to look it up on YouTube. This type of gas is known to have a huge number of charged clusters. Its inventor discovered that the gas would escape its cylinders within 12 months, meaning that it would seem to burrow through or seemingly escape the pressurized vessel. And he noted that not only would it transmute certain elements, including platinum, but you could burn ceramic, for example, and heat this 147 degree Fahrenheit flame. As soon as it hits ceramic, you would get the electron clusters dissolving themselves. They would react with the ceramic surface. Instantaneous 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. Because the electrons are basically breaking apart, they're ripping other electrons off. The thermal energy, or Brownian motion, measured by degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius in a material, is based on the actual vector momentum of its charged particles. And so if those electrons are breaking apart and moving really quickly, those protons are virtually unbound, so electrons can slam into them, and this is where the transmutation comes in. A nucleus of an atom whatever it's made of, be it hydrogen, oxygen, or even a heavy metal like iron, is only stabilized by its electron valence shell. If you rip off its valence electrons, its nuclei is now unstable. We already see this in nuclear decay, where a proton pops off and for some reason it's not stable and it will break apart, or a neutron pops off and it can spontaneously convert into other materials like electrons and neutrinos. So very strange phenomena with nuclear decay, that these seemingly stable particles in the nucleus tend to break down and not be stable at all when they are isolated from the nucleus. But the same exact thing happens when the nucleus is deprived of all electrons. It's now highly transmutable because it's not stabilized by that external electric field, which means that all other fields can excite or influence it. That's exactly what we're looking at with most transmutation. Is it's really just a tearing off of the electron shell. Hutchinson identified this quite a while ago, talked about it. Those videos are unfortunately no longer available, and last time I asked him, he couldn't quite remember exactly what he had said at that time. But it's logged. It's pretty well known at this point. And Bob Greenyer has the physical evidence, electron microscopy, and spectral analysis to prove all of this stuff that I'm talking about now. I'm just mentioning it here at the end of the show because we're at the 2 hour and 6 minute mark. And might as well throw that in.
Absolutely. I think
absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And so again, in the more layman's terms, because of what he's talking about, what you're really trying to do is get these extra electrons to excite, to break things apart. So these clusters, it just goes right in, and it doesn't actually require the actual heat. So where steel doesn't melt for 1200 degrees, when you're using this pure Brown's gas flame, that burns at less heat than a Bic lighter. You can put it right up to your skin and it doesn't do anything.
Exactly, non-reactive to your skin.
Yeah,
it's already hydroxide. It's not going to react to the water in your skin. It's not going to react to that material there unless you happen to have some salts on your skin where it can actually interact. Don't rub ceramic powder on your skin. Just say, yeah, you can get it to react if you've got dirty fingers, but you wash your hands. Yeah, it's not going to react with your biological materials, but you give it something that it actually can rip electrons out of, and good God, it's going to get hot really fast, and it will glow bright as the sun and burn right through a freaking fire brick. I've watched it cut through a fire brick in less than 5 seconds. It's unbelievable. The heat that's instantaneously generated is crazy.
It like has no heat, but it does a reaction that has like insane amounts of heat. Like, but the heat's not there. It's the most mind-blowing shit you ever saw. Like, you watch metal glow orange and turn into a puddle, and then the flame that's doing it's only a couple hundred degrees. You're like, that is not how this works.
Right. Well, if you think about it this way, the kinetic energy of the velocity for all electrons in that particular assembly, let's say you have 48 electrons, which is a stable number for an exotic vacuum object that Ken Shoulders discovered. 48 electrons, 24 electrons, these are stable structures. We can have multiples of these, harmonics of these. And as you stack more within that 12 metric, you'll end up getting more and more complicated structures that wrap in on each other in multi-torus forms. When they unravel, those electrons are moving within those forms. They're not stationarily bound as if, there's no motion going on there. They're actually moving at incredibly high relativistic speeds. That momentum is exactly where the extra spontaneous energy that seems to appear from nowhere is directly coming from. It's measurable in the vector momentum of the angular velocity for the electron cluster and its circulating charges.
Almost like a fucking spark gap, right?
Exactly.
Almost like a flywheel that you try to grab onto and stop instantly. If you suddenly jam something into a flywheel that's moving really quickly, it's going to tear that thing apart that you jammed into it and tear itself apart, which is exactly what happens. The electron cluster pops. It breaks, if you will, and all of its vector momentum from all those charges tear into whatever happens to be in the way, cutting a hole straight through it and ripping out the matter and basically taking it apart as it goes.
It's absolutely fascinating. And because that happens in such an actual cold reaction, when you use that as a fuel it doesn't burn so hot. So you don't get the piston burn. You don't get the valve burn. You don't need to, people don't realize in a conventional engine, they actually use fuel to put out a fire in a lot of these engines at the end of the burn. So that's why you end up with a lot of this extra fuel that then gets combusted. Like in a car, it's going to get into your catalytic converter, which all your catalytic converter basically is a honeycomb of porcelain that gets super hot and burns off that excess fuel. Is all you have going on.
Platinum catalytic reaction, right, with your carbon dioxide or your carbon monoxide to break it down or bind it with another oxygen so that it is heavier carbon dioxide, which is dealable. Or preferably water if it's working correctly. It should really rebind everything.
Yeah.
But the problem with engines is that they don't burn gas properly. The idea of fuel injection is a slap in the face to efficiency. You can't expect to put liquid fuel droplets into the cylinder of an engine, and during the course of a single quarter cycle of one full, stroke, that you're going to get the entirety of vaporization for that fuel. You have to pre-atomize it, and that means preheating the fuel. That means mixing it before it ever enters the engine, so it is fully in a ultrafine vaporous state, so that it can all combust. But
then you're going to need a whole lot more compression too.
Efficient.
You're gonna need so much more compression, so much more air. That's why diesels are so much more efficient, and especially if you put that hydrogen in them, you're punching in like 30-1 on a diesel compared to 11-1 on a car or something like that.
Most of those aren't too far off from average. Yeah, I mean you can get 20-1 or more on a diesel easy, and forget about over 20-1 on almost any automobile engine.
Yeah, you're punching in so much more air for the reaction on a diesel. It's a much more air-driven reaction.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter the air to fuel ratio mixture if the fuel is still in large droplets that can't possibly hope to evaporate or mix with oxygen during that cycle. They're going to end up coming out the exhaust pipe and creating deposits in the entire exhaust system, not actually producing horsepower for the engine. Though they will give you plenty of extra waste heat.
Yeah. So again, you put that hydrogen in there, you're really mitigating all these factors. You're basically running opposite of them and really balancing the system, in my opinion, all around.
Yeah, a buddy of mine actually did a fuel vaporizer system for his Toyota Corolla. I think it was a 1980 something Toyota Corolla. Anyways, him and I, we drove in this vehicle. It was totally loaded up with a bunch of this crap. There's barely enough space to sit. We had to kind of chunk out a spot for me and whatnot to just be able to have a passenger spot. Anyways, this car was overloaded. And it's a fairly little car. It's already got, at this point that I'm riding in it with him, it's got 230,000 miles on it. We go from here almost all the way to Florida. We get about 2/3 of the way there, and we have to stop for fuel once. He's got a normal size gas tank. It's not upgraded. We fill up about 2/3 of the way there, refill. He's getting roughly about 100 to 120 miles per gallon on his vaporizer system. So he just simply doesn't fuel up very often because his travels allow him to do this all the time. He makes sure that stays in a warm environment. But the fuel vaporizer gives him, like I said, 100 to 120 miles per gallon. And this was proven by the continuous, daunting 14 hours on the road trip, which was just painful as a little kid, I can tell you. But that's when I was introduced to this tech, is that, holy shit, this Toyota Corolla that's like way older than I am at that age is getting like 5 times more miles per gallon than my dad's truck. Well, I better pay attention to what this guy has done because this is really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Finally
it's funny how
found.
efficiently burning fuels can make a big difference.
Which to me, honestly, even if we can get an over unity device, which it's that to me is an over unity device where that thing's producing free energy all on its own, and you're taking each one of those cells.
I don't know about
But
free energy.
even-
Like I said, it's about 5 times more efficient than your normal internal combustion engine system. But keep in mind that most internal combustion engine systems are ranked between 12 to 20% efficiency. So let's just say that this was probably pushing 80% efficiency. Maybe. I mean, I'm giving extra here. I don't know what the actual total efficiency is because I'm not sure what the value of fuel per kilogram is of gasoline in terms of miles per gallon, horsepower, and thermal output. I would have to measure all of those characteristics simultaneously to see how many, what's that, British thermal units, BTUs, the engine was producing, how many horsepower it was producing, and what the total displacement was of all gases generated in order to get a real number on that. All I can tell you is that it consumed 5 times less fuel than comparable vehicles of its type. And that's plenty good enough for most of us, which would love to have 5 times more miles per time we have to fill up our gas tank. So I don't think I really care too much. I can guarantee you it's not over Unity, though. That's one thing I will point out. It's definitely not that. Not in the fuel vaporizer system.
Well, even
however,
when you're talking about that,
heat does transmutation.
Even when you're talking about
totally
that, like it's more of a radiant energy. Anything I've seen that's at all over Unity, it's more radiant type thing. And our systems that we're trying to use are so heavy in the push that you really just can't. Like, you can't beat a car or a diesel engine for trying to tow something uphill, like living in the mountains, pulling a semi-trailer. You need too much push to use a passive type energy.
Well, and now we get into the crystal growth purpose and why I'm dealing with Rochelle salts of all things. I'm an electrogravity guy. I don't really deal with crystal growth or any of these eccentric kind of things. I'm pretty much just into the science, which is, so when I do talk, I'm going to be really heavy on the tech data, and I do apologize for the audience when I get like right into the technicals out of nowhere. But in that same format, Rochelle salts have been demonstrated and reported to extract thermal energy from the environment when oscillated. And that is exactly why I have a high interest in them and why I'd like to grow them in monocrystalline form, so I can precisely measure every single facet of what I'm doing and make sure that I get along that grain axis the maximum electrical output per differential of degree C or degree Z.
Without any deterioration to the crystal?
Exactly. Monocrystalline, completely pure I should say clarity is clear as diamond, so that's what I'm going for.
Nice.
Very nice.
Very nice. I want to make them of crystals myself.
Yes.
And as
it's the only way.
Right? Like crystals are higher dimensional physical matter. Like the right crystal.
They are useful electromechanical molecular machines that we can make do our bidding if we can make them right.
Well, I would call them the lower dimensional, though. Your higher dimension is your plasma energy. Your crystal's your structure. That's your lower dimension. So I'm not. That's one of the things I have against the whole love and light movement, and even just most theologies right now, the way people are presenting them.
Yeah,
it's all ascension and everything else. As an alchemist, you purify the sulfur to its epitome, then you purify the salt to its epitome. The sulfur ascends, the salt descends. And then you put them back together through the mercury in the middle. And so it's both an ascension and a descension. So I think the salt is really your lowest,
Yeah, in a manner of speaking, you could say your mercurial exchange in the alchemical language basically just talks about a electrochemical exchange of oppositely charged particles. And because mercury is highly ionizable and was recognized as such by the alchemist, any type of chemical interaction which uses an ion exchange is referred to in the ancient alchemy as mercurial because it does utilize this mechanism. But salts are mercurial because of that same exact thing where they can exchange anions and lose their constituent charged particles in order to associate themselves in conjunction with the chemical reaction taking place. And because they're already bound of an electropositive and electronegative element put together, you have both of your necessary parts in order to control whatever reaction that you're going for. If you take a look at your electrochemical charts from the 1940s, 1950s, almost every single salt that's stable we can find today has one from the electropositive and one from the electronegative side of your elements. And it's just so straight out 100% accurate in terms of it's going to be an electropositive and electronegative. You can see why the ancient alchemists had such a heads up on today's chemists, which try to do much more complicated mechanisms in order to backwards engineer the simplicity of nature.
That's a very good way of wording that. I could not agree more.
Much better than I word things. I speak hillbilly.
You speak beyond.
Hey,
hillbilly.
y'all, truth is truth.
Yeah.
Truth, y'all. Like, these look like massive fractal arrays, and we're told these are also sigils. Like, just, it's mind-blowing.
What are they calling the that Vestigir and the Helm of Awe on that one, that last one that you were just showing? Those are
these ones
from the Galdebrock. Yeah, right there. I don't see what they're calling it yet. Right there, the one you were just on, no, the upper one.
Yeah, the one above.
The upper right hand corner. That's the Helm of Awe, and then the over here, that is, or there's the Helm of Awe on the left, right there. This is from, these are from the Galdebrock. Yeah. So this is all runic, supposedly, but this is extremely post-Christianization. So you can see that when you look at them, they resemble really more the Solamic type system than they do the runic. But those are actually from the Galdebrock. They claim that that's a Germanic runic magic right here. This one on the upper, this one right here is called the Helm of Awe, and supposedly, so I think that one is actually a cymatic symbol from a sound, and you were supposed to take lead and put that symbol on your forehead right over your third eye in lead, and then when that vibration, and then when that vibration would happen, the other people would get this second of awe where they just would freeze for a second. And if you had that symbol on your third eye, you wouldn't. And you would get just a blink of a second to get a critical strike while they're kind of standing there with their pants down.
Fascinating. And I've also read a lot of them say to do these seals in gold or silver, which are also very superconducting, or not superconductive, but higher conducting electrical metals that, if you're putting it right on your third eye, that's an interdimensional potential technology circuit seal. That
I find that interesting. That symbol right there, the third to the right in the second row from top down, I do recognize that symbol. I've seen it many times before. It's something fundamental. I'm not sure where I've seen it before, but I have definitely recognized that very symbol. Would you pronounce what that linguistic pronunciation is, BurnEye, if you can read it? That's a little too small for me to read on my screen.
Kaupalaki? This one? Is that the one?
I have definitely seen that before.
Nice. All right. Well, we are getting rather late. It is 1:35 in the morning. My wife just got off work here, which she needs me to come pick her up so she's not stranded downtown. So this was pretty epic. Oops. Sorry. We'll call her a wrap and do this again very soon. You're doing spiders tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. No. I'm sorry, Bernie. I almost forgot. There's a different guest tomorrow. Can we do next week at 5?
Yeah, no worries, brother.
Next week, Saturday at 5.
No,
then we spider it up, and you can come spider it up anyways if you want. But we will put the focus on you. And Jeremy, I'd really like to talk to you too at some point. But yeah, let's Jeremiah.
Yeah, you always and I'll be there. Otherwise, I'll probably be in and out like I was today.
Faux show. Yeah, I might still.
I love you guys.
Figured out. Definitely, I'll be watching either way. And I just wanted to end quickly and show this one I found, so you can see aluminum, which is wrapped around coil solenoid that I have there, coil, and then another copper wire just wrapped around it. But as soon as it goes into the water on this anode side, it's turning into this red, oh my goodness, red, what's the color? Maroonish material that it breaks
very
down
deep,
to.
Dark. Yeah, very deep red.
Right? And this is the material when it's in this maroonish state and you dry it out. Literally, it was this right here. I took this coil off, dried it out, and then when I touched the red powder stuff, it's spontaneously combusted and it actually lit and burnt away the rest of the aluminum that was not connected to electricity, water, or anything. It was quite fascinating.
Wow.
So I'm gonna be working on reproducing some more of that and sending some of this red matter to Jeremiah to start experimenting with, playing with, and testing out. And yeah,
see, I have to wonder if it's an oxidation reaction that's happening with that.
Quite possible.
Yeah, good question. I was going to mention I formed new hydrogen carbides by having 2 high voltage electrodes between various salts and being able to form long chains or strings of these various materials between those electrodes. It's been kind of fascinating watching this in recent experiments.
Absolutely. And the red matter being hydrides and stuff, that I believe that's exactly what the ancient alchemists refer to as this red state matter, the crystalline matter, and the transmutatable materials, and they call it the red matter, the mercury state of metals in transmutation, and that's exactly what this is some type of hydride or oxide that forms off of it, and that I've gotten several metals to turn into this red maroon crazy active state that they're now confirming in science to be superconductive meta material. And red matter, real red matter. And on that note,
and that happens quickly on the aluminum, you said? Really quickly?
On the anode side.
Over the course of days, I mean,
it takes about a day or two for the maroon to develop on this much in it, but it does.
Yeah, my processes are quick. Bernie's processes, some of them take months, but he keeps with them, so they're not all fast, but he's been able to reproduce almost every experiment that I've seen so far. Like, there are no one-off kinds of scenarios except for those which involved freezing.
Indeed. All right. Sorry. Wife is messaging nonstop. I got to go.
Yes.
Love you all.
Get to the wife.
We'll probably
catch you guys
tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. We'll be doing this again. Much so.